I was reading about Hinduism the other day, and I realized that they offer a very interesting and insightful perspective to what they call the 4 stages of human life. And the religion also talks about the specific focus that we must have in each of those stages. So stage 1 is what they call brahmacharya, where it's kind of the first quarter of our life, and the focus that they recommend must be on learning, right, as a student. The second quarter and the second stage is called grist, which is essentially translates as being a householder. So the focus is on earning a living, having a family, and so forth. The third stage is called vanaprastha, and that essentially is around the time when we are retiring from an active professional life or finishing some of our other household duties. And the focus at this stage must be to reflect and contemplate. And the fourth stage is what they call sannyas, which is essentially when we are kind of little more ready to let go of the worldly and material pleasures of life. And the focus at this stage must be on creating a spiritual life and focusing on community. The reason I'm bringing this in today in this conversation is because I understand and I assume most of you are either retired recently from active pursuit of professional activities, or even being a homemaker and some of your responsibilities are now behind you, or you are about to enter that stage. Either way, it's fair to assume that most of you are in the third stage, and so am I, by the way. So third stage of our life where the focus is to reflect. And reflect on what? The idea is to reflect on who you truly are and what do you want the rest of your life, which is in some cases half of our lives. What do you want the rest of your life to be about? To reflect on what is the meaning of life in the first place. To reflect on is there an opportunity to experience greater happiness in the rest of our lives? Maybe reflect on, is it possible for me to create actually a better version of myself in the rest of my life? And if so, how do I go about discovering it? And it was these type of questions more than 10 years ago that I was wrestling with when I started my journey of trying to discover the better me. And what I'm hoping to do over the next 20 minutes or so is to just share a bit of my journey of struggling with these questions and the 3 key lessons I learned in the process. So I was well sort of settled into a corporate life. I used to run the Asia business for a mutual fund company called Franklin Templeton. And business was fantastic, it was growing like this, and personally I was very fortunate to grow very rapidly in the organization and so forth, and all the good things that come with it. But somewhere at some point in my career I was beginning to become very acutely aware of the sense of incompleteness within me. I still remember telling my wife for the first time about it, and she was like, what's wrong with you? You've got everything going, like what's missing? And it's hard to describe, but despite all the success, something was definitely missing in my life. And around that time, I happened to get involved with some NGOs in my personal capacity, and just spending time with these folks really inspired me in many different ways. It really got me thinking that this high-flying job that I have and jumping in and out of planes that I'm doing every week, kind of what difference does it make? Does my existence really matter in any way? Will I leave this world any better than what I inherited in the first place? I was also reading a lot at that time in the space of, who am I, purpose of my life, social change, and all these sort of existential type of questions. Maybe you could argue I was going through kind of midlife crisis. And I think I was, but in a good way, because I think many of us, particularly when we enter the third stage of our life, begin to have these questions in our mind in those quiet moments, but then come Monday morning and boom, we are gone. We are back into our everyday routine of, the daily life, and the spark is gone. I was so fortunate because for me, the spark just won't go away. It haunted me. Also, I'd learned some meditation techniques way back 20 years ago and found them really effective personally in my relationships, professionally, and so forth. But again, with a busy corporate life, these things tended to be the remnants of my day. Things you want to do but don't end up doing enough of. And around that time, maybe I felt really confused or conflicted, and that's why I revived my meditation. Initially for 30 minutes a day, then I moved on to an hour a day. So wherever I was traveling around the world, I would find my time to meditate. Long story short, I think what was coming through to me was, well, business was really exciting, growing and all of that, but two things were just giving me a very different kind of joy. One, the idea of working on myself, working on my own personal and spiritual growth. And secondly, even though at that time in a very small way, but of helping others. And these two things really got me excited. And that's how kind of the whole notion started in my head that I wish I can create a life which revolves around these two themes. A bit of a hobby horse. And there were many ideas crossing my mind. Should I start an NGO? Should I introduce new forms of holistic leadership to organizations? Should I get into the wellness space? And so on and so forth. But somewhere in that search and research is where I literally stumbled into the field of life coaching. And as I started to learn more about it, it just fired my imagination. It was like, wow, this is it. It's like, this is what I was meant to do in this lifetime. Everything else was just preparation for it. It's like finding your calling, that kind of a very strong intuitive connection. And I'm a left brain, analytical, engineer by background kind of a person, but this was a call from the heart. And I'm so glad I heard it. And as that whole idea started getting crystallized in my head, then I couldn't hold myself back. Then it wasn't, one day, few more years, and I'll be financially more secure. At that time, my kids were like 10 and 4. So, young family and lots of responsibility. But I was so drawn to it that I was ready to make this shift. And I was also mindful of the fact that this wasn't a career shift I was making. I wasn't looking for another role or a job or a business. It was really a life shift that I was seeking, where I wanted to have my life be defined by these two principles of working on myself and helping others to work on themselves. And that's how I embarked on the journey of, hoping to grow as a person and hoping to perhaps explore at least the path of discovering the better me, and hopefully in the process helping others find a better version of themselves. It's been more than 10 years now. Actually, this summer I complete 12. And all I can say is it's just been a blessing for me. What started as a vocation, as a passion for me, has actually become a successful business practice. But more importantly, I think for me, the reward of having the opportunity to work with people from diverse backgrounds and seeing them experience significant positive change in their lives is just wonderful. I also do a lot of work voluntarily with, I nearly keep about 10 to 15% of my coaching hours reserved for leaders of social sector. And I always meet some absolutely inspiring people there as well. At a personal level, I think I've been very disciplined in sticking to the plan that I wanted, the life that I wanted to create. As I said, it wasn't a career shift, it was a life shift. So I restrict my coaching hours to only 6 hours a day. And that leaves me time to meditate every morning, time to exercise or play a sport in the evening, a lot of time with the family. I read a lot, have been writing a blog for some time. I recently got my first book published. So a bunch of different things, but they are all centered around the same core theme of working on my own personal and spiritual growth and helping others in their journeys. So I have a much simpler life now, but one that I feel so much happier and find so much meaning in. Now, clearly, so much about myself, but really the reason I'm sharing this little journey is just to set the context, because I have learned so many lessons, working with people, coaching them, as well as in my own journey. But there are 3 lessons that I particularly want to sort of share with you today. The first is that if we want to experience happiness, we need to recognize that the change is truly within us. Very often we tend to externalize our challenges. And what that means is we see the problem outside of us. So my boss is too intimidating, or I've been married for more than 20 years now and I don't think my spouse really cares for me anymore. Or how often we blame our children, right? Children these days don't listen to their parents or don't have time for their parents or don't respect us or whatever, right? Now, somewhere subconsciously believing that only if someone else could change, only if they could alter their behavior, I will be in a happier place. Give you an example, on a weekend I go to a friend's house and sometimes I'll meet someone I've never met before, right? And I tell them I'm a life coach, and almost certainly the person would tell me, oh, come, let me introduce you to my wife. I think she'll greatly benefit from talking to you. And sure enough, as I actually end up meeting the wife, she's like, oh, you are a life coach. Come, let me introduce you to my husband because I think he desperately needs a life coach. The reality is that actually much of the change is within us. As we begin to look within, as we begin to work on reforming our inner selves, irrespective of the people and the circumstances around us, we begin to experience a different reality. I think the question worth asking is your boss too intimidating, or are you not courageous enough to express yourself fully? Has your spouse stopped caring for you, or have you stopped demonstrating your love for them? Have your children stopped listening to you, or have you stopped understanding their challenges? Which one is the truth? And it's not about shifting the blame. It's not about saying they are right and I'm wrong, or let's come up with a compromise. It's not about that at all. It's the difference between looking out of the second floor of Marina Bay Sands and the 52nd floor. The scenery by itself outside is the same, but it looks very different from the two levels. So as we change our perspective, our attitudes, our beliefs, we suddenly start relating to the same circumstances very differently. In fact, as we start behaving differently, very often the other side of the equation, the other people, whether it's our spouse or kids or colleagues or whatever, they start responding very differently and more favorably as well. The second lesson that I want to talk to you about is that for deeper happiness, and particularly if there is any interest in searching for the better me, it is absolutely paramount to enhance our level of self-awareness. Understanding who are we really, and what are our motivations, what are your value systems, what are your greatest worries, just understanding all of that. As the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, those who know others are learned, but those who know themselves are wise. Because unless we have a deeper understanding of ourselves, what are we going to do? We get easily influenced by whatever is popular around us. And this self-awareness can be at so many different levels, at all the four levels, at the physical level. Just understanding your physical habits. How do you organize? How do you prioritize? How do you spend your day? Where does time go and why? At the emotional level, understanding our own emotional triggers. What makes us happy and sad and anxious and worried and hopeful. At the mental level, understanding our attitudes and perceptions. Dr. Lee just talked about beliefs, right? What beliefs we have about ourselves. Understanding all of that. And at the spiritual level, understanding the very core of our being. Who are we at the essence beneath this physical form? But what this requires is choosing to switch off from time to time from our busy lives, creating some quiet pauses in creating some structured reflection time. I have personally found meditation to be of great help in this regard, but different people have different ways to reflect. As much as we need physical exercise for our physical health, we need reflection time and these quiet moments for our emotional and mental well-being. Because only when we create those moments of stillness within ourselves, those wonderful pauses, can we see our own recurring behavior? Can we begin to see our repeated habits, emotional and mental patterns? Because only when we pause do we begin to realize how judgmental we can be, how stereotypical we can be, how greedy, how angry, how frustrated sometimes, and how insecure, how anxious. And only then, when we begin to work on reforming our inner selves, can we begin to inculcate greater love and compassion and authenticity and and trust and equanimity and mindfulness and all these wonderful things. Only when we reflect can we begin to see our repeated belief systems. Beliefs about aging, we just heard that, right? Beliefs about aging, beliefs about learning new skills, belief about making new friends, beliefs about our own potential in the rest of our life. Or how frequently we end up putting our current happiness on hold, making it contingent on some future events. Very often we do that. Right now I'm not feeling well, or I'm not that healthy. Only when I'm healthy will I be happier. Only when my children are well settled will I be happier. Only when I meet success in whatever I'm trying to do will I be happier, and so on and so forth. But when we slow down and we begin to look within, we realize that for us to experience real happiness, we have to learn to be happy in the present, irrespective of all the limitations that we may have in our life. Because happier people don't have perfect lives. They don't have perfect lives, but they are more comfortable. They are more at peace with the imperfections of their life. And that's an important lesson to think about. The third lesson, and this one's been particularly close to my heart and something really powerful for me, and I've seen many clients benefit from it as well, and that is the need to clarify and commit to living the rest of our lives by a higher purpose. Working with so many different people and through my own little personal journey, I've come to believe that each one of us is uniquely gifted and has a special purpose to fulfill on this planet. But the question is, do we take the time to discover it in ourselves? How often are we just busy, running, like on the treadmill, running really hard, but perhaps not really getting anywhere meaningful? We all want to, get higher. We want to go further. We want more in life. But sometimes in this sort of desperate pursuit for, climbing the ladder of social status and financial success or business progress or whatever, do we pause and stop and wonder whether our ladder is leaning against the right wall in the first place? Which ladder are we trying to climb? Where are we trying to get to? Is this the ladder that best represents you and your value system, or is it whatever seems, popular all around us? So I think the question worth asking is, what do you value most? What's most important to you personally? Do you want more success, or do you want to make a more significant contribution towards something meaningful? Is money more important or happiness? And these things don't have to be either or necessarily, but what's more important to you? What's the role of family and friends, and what about community? What about environment, and so on? In today's modern society, we've got so used to measuring our progress based on these external and visible parameters of evaluation. The size of the house or the car or the job title or the size of a business or whatever. I have a self-assessment happiness test on my website, a very simple one which tens of thousands of people have taken, and you're free to take it as well if you're interested. But I think that better measures the inner state of our being, not how we see or how we achieve or how successful we appear, but how do we feel inside. And one of the things I would share here is that, having worked with so many successful people, I can tell you that the happiness scores of many of the successful people are all over the place. And it only reinforces the point, which we all know deep down in our heart but often forget in the busyness of life, that success does not automatically lead to happiness. Happiness is a work by itself. The other thing we get so caught up is the notion of relative success. So it's not good enough how I'm doing compared to where I started in my life, but what matters is how am I doing compared to all my friends and peers and social network, right? And our kiasu and all of that comes through very quickly. So the person driving the Toyota Corolla is constantly looking at the Camry, and not that the guy or the person in the Camry, trust me, is any happier, because they are thinking, when are they going to upgrade to the E-Class? And in the process, many of us end up living a poor man's life because we are constantly thinking about all the things we don't have, rather than be grateful for all the blessings that we do. And that's what leaves a vacuum in our life. And unless we have the anchor of a higher purpose in our life, we are going to continue to experience this vacuum. We will continue to experience undercurrents of unhappiness and lack of fulfillment in our life. So think about, what is it in the rest of your life that you want to commit your life to? What's that one thing? What is it that when you are 85 and 90 and more, you will be so proud and so glad that you dedicated the last few decades of your life to? What is that? Is it you want to be happy and spread happiness all around you? Is it you want to continue learning and growing and sharing that learning and helping others in the community? I don't know what it is, because it's a personal thing. But whatever it is, one thing I'm quite confident of is that once you clarify that for yourself and commit to living it every day, you'll be surprised how favorably your life will start to change. So those are the 3 key lessons that I wanted to mention to you. The fact that the change is within us, the importance of developing greater self-awareness and reflection time, and to committing to a higher personal purpose in life. In ending, I would only say, when Edmund Hillary, by the way, climbed the Mount Everest, and one of the first people to do so, he was interviewed at the end of it, and one of the journalists asked him, what does it feel to conquer the tallest mountain in the world? And Edmund Hillary reflected for a bit, took a little while, and then said, you know what? It's not the mountain we conquer, but we conquer ourselves. And that's the essence of the message that I want to leave you with, which is let's not focus as much on external achievement as much as we need to focus on reforming our inner selves. And by the way, this is such a democratic process. This whole approach is available to everyone, irrespective of your financial status, social position, education, race, color, whatever, it doesn't matter. Any of us can undertake this path if we choose to commit to it. And that's why I like to invite you to consider the opportunity each one of us has to deepen our self-awareness, to just take more personal responsibility for our thoughts, actions, and behavior, and commit to living the purpose we were born on this earth for, so that we can all experience deeper happiness and greater meaning in our life, and hopefully live and find the best version of ourselves. Thank you.